Hey everybody, it's CVH here, and today we'll be talking about more revealed cards from the upcoming Fall of the Dark Brotherhood expansion for Elder Scrolls Legends. Casual reminder, this expansion comes out on April the 5th, but pre-orders are available now. All you gotta do is log into Legends, and you should be able to see the pre-order option available. Can be bought with money in the pre-order, also will be available in gold. You can check previous news videos for more information, but it will contain more story mode, and I believe 40 new cards that you'll be getting playsets of if you get the expansion. So, this is part 2 of my first impressions video for the expansion, the series. We have 4 cards to talk about today that have been revealed over the course of the past week. I plan on doing these kind of regularly, maybe once a week or so. I want to do them in parts so I don't have to do a million cards in the same video and make it super long. Just going to briefly go over, as I did in the last video, my thoughts on these 4 cards and some implications of them in the future, whether I think they're good, whether I think they're bad, mostly in relation to Constructed based on what we know now about the current meta and the cards that have been revealed, but I'll also be touching on Arena as well because a lot of these cards will probably be designed for that format. A lot of people play that format. There are even a few specialists who like to only play that format, and I've played quite a bit of it in recent weeks and such. So, with that said, there are 2 commons, 1 rare and 1 legendary, I believe, to go over. So I'm going to start with the lower rarity cards and sort of build the hype as we go. This is not the order they were revealed in, but this is the order I'm personally going to go in. The first one is Sanctuary Pet, Spider. Hooray for Spooters. We have a 3-cost 2/2 in Agility, with lethal, and summon Shackle an enemy creature in this lane. So sort of like a Shrieking Harpy type effect, not a prophecy obviously. And the first thing that really comes to mind is, oh no, we're playing a 3-drop 2/2. Obviously that's pretty bad stat-wise for a 3-drop, but the card has a lot of utility to make up for it. So obviously weak to Windkeep Spellsword and Daggerfall Mage, and even cards like Young Mammoth and Haunting Spirit, which don't have ward but just simply have better stat lines. However, this card is able to shackle something larger like a Mammoth and then trade into it 1-for-1 thanks to the lethal. Late in the game, this card does have a lot of viability where a card like Young Mammoth might not, since if your opponent plays some giant threat that you need to stop attacking for a turn, out of all the cards I previously mentioned, this is the one card that's going to help you be able to do that. Another thing that's cool is we're seeing more spiders, so if they ever happen to go the route of giving us some spider synergy cards, I think this card could be pretty good. As it stands, it's hard to say where it could be good and constructed. My initial reaction is that if I'm playing a deck without intelligence, so I can't play Shrieking Harpy already, if I'm wanting to play a Shackle, I'm probably going to be playing a more defensive deck, and I feel like Giant Snake just accomplishes that better. But one thing a Giant Snake doesn't accomplish better are this card's implications in Arena. Now this is a common. Shrieking Harpy used to be a common, and it was bumped to a rare specifically for Arena. A little bit of fact for you guys. Now Shrieking Harpy obviously costs less, is a prophecy, and it used to be a 2/2 instead of a 2/1 when that change occurred. So you could say it was better. But the fact remains that Shackle is incredibly powerful in a format like Arena, and this is a common, so I expect and am excited to be picking multiples of this card in Arena and probably ranking it very highly on the tier list, the Arena tier list on BetweenTheLanes.net. Your #1 source for Elder Scrolls Legends content. Feel free to check it out. Hashtag sellout, hashtag ad. But yeah, Sanctuary Parrot, it strikes me more as an Arena card than a constructed card just because of its weakness to a lot of relevant removal, and since we already have a very powerful Shackle effect in Giant Snake. But people are always looking for more options to Shackle. I recently played against a Ram Scout on the ladder that was playing Arrow in the Knee as a multiple in very high legend. I think it was top 10 or top 5. So I would definitely expect this card to see some level of constructed play. The amount that comes to kind of depends on when else is released, but definitely expect this card to see a lot of play and impact the Arena meta heavily. So moving on to Endurance, I believe, with, let's get this up, the Stalking Shadow Scale. So initially we have another 3-drop and we have better stats, which is great. We're moving up there as far as stats are concerned. We have a 3-drop 3/4 with Slay +1/+1, and Slay is the new ability word that's coming in. It'll also be applied to cards like Pomerot Renegade and Night Talon Lord, which is whenever this attacks and destroys an enemy creature on your turn. So Stalking Shadow Scale is a 3/4, 4/3 with Slay +1/+1. Pretty simple. Whenever it's going to kill someone, it's going to become a 4/5. All of a sudden it's turning into a Stone Tooth Scrapper, then a 5/6, and then so on if it keeps killing things. It's an Argonian, which is kind of sweet. Art is super nice on this card. Have to mention that. I don't really want to talk about the art too much, but the art on this card is really sick, guys. I enjoy it quite a lot, and I think the premium is going to look amazing. I'm into those premiums. But, so while this card is obviously a lot more impressive stat-wise, I don't like, right now the market's kind of cornered as far as 3-drops are concerned. I just mentioned a few when I was talking about the pet. We have the Haunting Spirit and the Young Mammoth specifically. Endurance has the market covered as far as 3-drop good stat creatures. Obviously, the Haunting Spirit itself has worse stats than this card, but it has an effect that more than makes up for it. The Slay effect on this is rather cute, but I don't think it's enough to really compete with Young Mammoth and Haunting Spirit. This card strikes me as another one that's going to be really, really powerful in Arena. The cards I mentioned are both great and potentially even better, but they are also rare. This is another common card like the Sanctuary Pet that's going to really shake up the Arena meta. All of a sudden, a lot of Endurance decks are going to have a lot of Stalking Shadow Scales. And in Arena, where they're, cards like Lightning Bolt are high picks but less common, this card could easily get the Slay effect off multiple times, where in Constructed, obviously you have more Shackles, more Silence, more removal. So in Arena, I think this card could be a real contender, and we could see it grow to some pretty impressive heights, in addition to already being, Imperial and Legionnaire stats, the 3-drop 3/4 from Willpower. It already is that. And Endurance is obviously more known for its really well-statted creatures, so we have a 3-drop 3/4 that can potentially grow. That seems very powerful in Arena. As far as Constructed goes, I'm unsure. Maybe those cards that I mentioned see potential nerfs in the future. It's definitely been a topic of conversation. I don't really see that being super likely, but, this card particularly could, as soon as we get a mechanic or a card that benefits Slay creatures specifically, and I have to imagine that's sort of coming. Like, let's say we even get a creature that says all of your other Slay creatures, or all of your Slay creatures get +1/+1, like they just have +1/+1 immediately. All of a sudden, all of those decks that want to use that card are going to be playing this over the Haunting Spirit and the Mammoth, and it's not even going to be close, really. So I think, it really just depends on what else is released in this set. As of the information we have, right now, currently, this card is very, very powerful in Arena, being a common, and in Constructed, it's passable. It depends on what else is released. So that's my thoughts on that card so far. Almost revealed the Legendary by accident. We're going to save that one for last if you guys haven't seen it, but we're moving on to Willpower with another 3-drop. It's the video of all the 3. I didn't even realize this when I was booting up the OBS today. How many 3-drops were revealed in the past week? Penitus Oculatus Agent. The 3-drop 2/3, so we're sort of in between stats now. We don't have amazing stats. We don't have terrible stats. We have pretty subpar stats still, though, with Summon, Steal a Creature's keywords. Now, this card is the tech choice of all tech choices. So it's definitely not like a simple beat stick like the Shadow Scale we just talked about. But this is really the answer to Daggerfall Mage, right? So Daggerfall Mage comes down on 3. It's worth noting also, when it's stealing a creature's keywords, including Ward, Charge, Breakthrough, etc., it's sort of like a Nasi in that, but they are fixing those creatures that say when or ward is removed. So Breton Conjure summons a 5/5 guard with the ward removed. When Daggerfall's ward is removed, you get a Tome of Alteration into your hand. Usually with a card like this or a Nasi, they would trigger their effects, but they are patching it to say when the ward is broken, which means a damage has to be dealt to the creature. So like, you Rapid Shot your Breton Conjure, that'll still give you a 5/5. But if you play a Penitus Oculatus Agent on it, all of a sudden, the ward is gone, it's on the Oculatus Agent, and you don't have your 5/5. So this is now a pretty sick counter to Daggerfall. And even if you're playing it on like a Windkeep Spellsword, they play a 2/2 with ward, they're feeling good about it. You play a 3-drop 2/3 with ward that effectively also did a ping to the Windkeep Spellsword, which is pretty crazy by itself. My worry about this card is that, besides ward specifically, I can't think of any keywords I'm really inclined to want to be stealing here. Obviously, a few of them are pretty bad. If you're stealing a charge or a drain, that could be good, but unless you're stealing them both together, it could be a little subpar, and this card could be easily removed. Ward is really the big one. And while it's insane against Daggerfall Mage and Breton Conjure and stuff like that specifically, in other matchups I feel like it might be a little bit too subpar. In Arena it could really get someone, but I don't know if it's consistent enough for me to want to take it in Arena. Wards are actually, more consistently played and constructed because there are Sorcerer decks and Battle Mage decks and stuff like that playing a lot of these Daggerfall Mages. You're rarely going to encounter one in Arena, even though it's a high pick. But yeah, if this card was a 3/3, you'd be punished a lot less for not getting its effect off. As it is, it feels very bad to play this on curve against basically anything that's not a Spellsword or a Daggerfall Mage, I fear. Maybe in a late game deck you'd want to see it, but in a lot of late game decks you have more efficient ways to deal with those cards by that point, such as maybe a Control Mage or a Control Monk. They wouldn't really need this card, I don't feel. But yeah, if your opponent plays a Haunting Spirit or Young Mammoth, this card is effectively unplayable in your hand, whereas if it was a 3/3, maybe it would be passable. So, much as the same as the Sanctuary Pet, I am somewhat worried about this card's stats. The Pet, however, has a much more playable effect at all stages of the game. Penitus is sort of that hit-or-miss card. If it misses, it really misses because it's a 3-drop 2/3, and that's really bad and constructed. But if it hits, it's really, really good. But is it good enough to warrant the slightly less efficient answers, but the cards like Execute that could be used in a much wider range of situations? Remains to be seen, but a very interesting card nonetheless. And moving on to the Legendary for this video. Not guaranteeing there'll be a Legendary for every video, I'll just see how they release the cards, but Garnag Dark Adherent. And now this card was actually, I think, out of the four we're talking about here, the first revealed. Makes sense that we'd get to it last. Now, I think, first and foremost, this is probably one of the best cards revealed so far, which is nice to see, because, you know, you want unique legendaries to be playable and feel good. Obviously, you're going to get your hands on this card if you're purchasing the expansion, just due to the nature of it not being a pack-based expansion. So, no real need to worry about, you know, well, I might not pull this card, feels bad, man, for me. 4-drop, 4/5 Orc, Shades of Stonetooth Scrapper, with Breakthrough, so already strictly better, and the effect, players can't have more than 7 Magicka. So a lot of people have already started, you know, flying off and talking about how this card might kill control decks. I don't think we're getting that far. I think, first of all, this is a unique legendary, and second of all, it is pretty easy to answer. It's not the most insane stat thing in the world. It's just a Stonetooth Scrapper, guys, and that's never been the most difficult thing to remove. Now, this card, later in the game, if your game happened to go late, could really piss off some people. You know, you turn 7, you drop this into a Dawn's Wrath turn, all of a sudden they can't do that anymore. That being said, there should be enough answers to it where it shouldn't just kill the archetype of control entirely. If you play it on turn 4, it's going to be a Stonetooth Scrapper with Breakthrough, which is great and everything, has some Orc synergy for your Orc decks, but they will have a few turns to deal with it before the Magicka restriction effect comes into play and really starts limiting options. So I'm not super worried about it killing control or anything like that. I do, however, think this should be a pretty instant inclusion in a lot of Orc decks, whether it be Crusader or Warrior, specifically Warrior Orc midrange, because those decks really just pack on the threats. This is another pretty threatening 4-drop. Not that the deck didn't already have those, but this one just seems, you know, if you're going to play Stonetooth Scrapper, you definitely want to be playing this. The decks almost never play anything that costs more than 7, from what I know at least. I don't know if that'll change with future releases, but that's basically how it functions right now. And it just gives you that sort of insurance against control decks. And if you play it later in the game, you know, if you're playing a mid-range deck, you're not going to be ending the game super quickly. If you're going later in the game, this could make plays very awkward for your opponent. For example, you play this down on like turn 9 or something, they want to mana core your board or something on your board, maybe even the Garnag itself, so they can, you know, kill a threat and then develop a guard at the same time, but Garnag's preventing that, so they have to simply use a Piercing Javelin. It might make their turn that much worse. And also it does bait removal itself, like let's say you have some giant threatening, I don't know, something bigger than Garnag basically is what I'm trying to say, and you play the Garnag, all of a sudden it might not be the largest thing on board later in the game, but since it's limiting your opponent's plays, they're basically just forced to deal with it first unless they have Silence, and then they have to silence it first and then probably just wait another turn to deal with the other thing. So in that way it's really, you know, making your already threatening mid-range deck even more threatening against those matchups. Pretty bad against aggro. They don't need their 7 Magicka, they're going to be trying to kill you, but it just functions as Stonetooth Scrapper with Breakthrough, which is already playable, so you don't really get punished for playing this card too much. It's just a thing that's not going to have much utility. In a straightforward aggro deck, again, I don't know if I would necessarily want to play this unless I had Orc Synergy, so I think this is really a card for Orcs, but I think it's really cool. They're encouraging people to play more Orc Synergy decks, and Garnag does a really good job of encouraging that. So I'm pretty excited to see it released. In Arena, I don't know what I'd pick it over, but again, it's a playable 4-drop 4/5. I wouldn't feel bad about it. If I'm drafting a heavy Orc deck, I would rather pick an Wood Orc Headhunter than this card, but definitely this is a playable card. I wouldn't feel bad about having it in any deck with red, even though a card like Reeve would be better a lot of the time, or Wood Orc and Orcs. This is a fine card, would pick it in Arena sometimes, and would play it in virtually every Orc deck I can think of currently. So that's it for today's reveal, or not really today's reveal, today's first impressions video about the revealed cards in the previous few days. Hopefully you've enjoyed. Hopefully this gave you some things to think about. Feel free to drop a like or a comment if you have enjoyed the video. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Join the conversation in the chat. Let me know if you think I overlooked something about these cards. Let me know if you think I underrated or overrated some things. Looking forward to doing more of these videos as more cards get revealed. Feel free to subscribe to the channel for more of these. Other strategy content, stream highlights, deck text. Feel free to follow the stream down below. And I will see you guys next time.